Hello, this is Dr. Nancy Trimbley with your Healthcare Arsenal podcast. This podcast is designed for that person who knows there's a better way towards health and wellness. They just don't know what that better way is. And my hope for you is that with each passing episode, you get closer to being your own best expert. Today, we are doing a deep dive into stealth health, teasing out some secret intel. And we are on chapter 5 reasons to use medications. Now you might think, Dr. Nancy, this is supposed to be a book to get people away from drugs. Why do you have a chapter on this? Well, because there's some actual reasons. But we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about the history of medications. They haven't been around for forever. And you remember, if we talk about the early 1900s, late 1800s, there was something called snake oil salesman, and there was magnetic healing and all kinds of stuff like that. Well, where did that go? And why are we all taking pills now? So let's dive in. Chapter 5 reasons to use medication. So right now, talking to my reader, I'm saying you are already on the first steps of your mission to unravel Mission U. You are asking better questions. What if I could heal? Why? Why is this going on with me? And where are my resources? You now know that you have more power than you realized. Your awareness that the system is constantly trying to drag you back in and regain its hold on you is a battle won. So just your realization is a battle won. That crazy television commercial with the two people in the bathtubs in a field is goofy enough to draw your attention. And, speaking of drug commercials, it's hysterical, all the side effects that they mention, and people still flock to get those drugs because one of two reasons, this is away from the book, one of two reasons is they are either true believers, like they are true believers of the medical model, and no matter how much common sense you try to speak to them, they are not going to see any other way, or they just don't know. They don't know there's a better way towards health and wellness besides pharmaceuticals. So share this podcast with them. All right, here we go. The movie that you watched with the kids on Saturday night prominently shows a can of soda pop on the kitchen countertop in the scene. That's product placement. Where you see a car, a very specific car make that's in a movie, that is placed product. Let's go on. Your favorite magazine now seems riddled with enticements to lure you to make bad food choices. Now, knowing that the system and its components are always vying for your attention means that you are wary of its influence. Your eyes are opened. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. One of the ways the system beguiles us is through medications. Medications, they work. Most of the time, the action of the drug fulfills its intended purpose. The symptom is suppressed. Take the pain reliever and your headache goes away. Take the little purple pill and your heartburn recedes. After 3 months on the statin drug, the numbers become smaller on your blood test. It's true, drugs work. They, most of the time, succeed at their intended outcome. Now, that doesn't mean it's the best route. It just means they succeed in doing what they say they're going to do. Medications do not solve the underlying problem at all. Every medication, besides placebo, has a side effect, and some even might say the placebos have a side effect. Every medication has a side effect because every medication, every drug you put in your body has an action, multiple actions. Now, sometimes one of those actions is a benefit, like your headache goes away. But there are other things going on in your body at the same time. It's just the nature of chemicals. Our body is a bag of chemicals. You put another chemical in, there's going to be chemical reactions. I go on. Introduction to the drug system starts early in life. Toddlers and infants are put on antibiotics to clear up ear infection. Antacids are used for reflux. Middle school and high school kids learn to ask mom for medication. What should be used as a temporary crutch becomes a knee-jerk reaction to subdue a recurring symptom. Never mind about true healing. So we are indoctrinated into the system very early on. Here is where you will exercise a new power. You've learned about your body and your problem because you are on mission U. You can also learn about the benefits and downfalls of medications. Using the most current available data, you can choose when to take or not to take a medication at your own discretion. You, my friend, are no longer a slave to the system. Here's the history of medications, and this is where it becomes fascinating. The system has developed medications over the last century that save us when our lives are in jeopardy. This is how the system started to gain popularity. Before the age of antibiotics, simple infections would kill you. Imagine the horror of watching a child die from a simple injury or bacterial pneumonia, scarlet fever, or tuberculosis. After antibiotics were in use, the survival rate of children rose and the chances of dying from infection plummeted. It was miraculous. Antibiotics enhanced the effectiveness of the care medical doctors offered and elevated their position in society. Very true. Before the age of antibiotics, medical doctors were in towns and were just like the guy that put shoes on your horses. It was just one more service. But the advent of antibiotics changed the medical doctors or the people's perception of medical doctors. I go on. The public put a lot of trust into medical doctors who not only wrote the prescriptions for the antibiotics, but in the early days dispensed that medication as well. The amazing properties of antibiotics actually propelled human advancement because people weren't dying of simple infections. The system also developed vaccines, which appear to have eradicated childhood and adult diseases that otherwise would have killed you or created a life of infirmity. The controversy still exists, and even more. Now, remember, I wrote this in 2017, 18, 19. So this is an even bigger bullet point to talk about at a later date, and I've done some YouTube videos about this. But the controversy still exists as to whether these specific diseases, meaning childhood diseases, were already on the decline because of better sewage systems and hygiene at that time. And it's at the same time that vaccines were introduced. So if you look at the rate of these illnesses, they were actually going down anyway. So another story for another day. Even so, the medical doctor and, quote, modern medicine was given credit for the achievement. Each time a new drug arrived on the scene as was linked to a change in human mortality, whether it was deserved or not, it strengthened the system. It strengthened the conventional medical model. Now, medications are not all bad. It's the overuse of medications that's bad. It's the shunning of other viable, effective, and extremely safe non-drug options that is bad. And this is, the whole point is that we can all coexist. There's two different models. There's a vitalistic model like chiropractic, acupuncture, homeopathy that looks at the whole person to heal the person, to allow the body to heal itself. And then there's the mechanistic system, that's the medical system, which looks at your eyes versus your lungs versus your intestines versus your knee. They don't look at the person as a whole being. They are mechanized and think of the body as a machine. I go on. It may seem like conventional medicine is beginning to embrace non-drug or alternative healing arts. Remember, I wrote this back in the late teens. Even so far as calling alternative healing arts complementary. I haven't heard that word in a while. But an undercurrent that the non-drug healers are quacks and unscientific still exists. Some people still think that I went to school for like 6 months. No, I did not. I went to school for uh, my program that I went to was a 5-year program that my school condenses to 3.5 years. The first 3 years are the same courses as medical school, and where then medical school goes into pharmacology and surgery, chiropractic school goes into the adjustment. Um, so, no, I have a lot of schooling. That's why I'm a DC, a doctor of chiropractic. So I go on, and it doesn't bother me at all. Can't you tell by my attitude? Um, so anyway, there's an undercurrent that the non-drug healers are quacks and unscientific. This discriminatory, and it is discrimination, the discriminatory attitude that relegates the practitioners of alternative healing arts to second-class citizens has occurred since the dawn of modern medicine as we know it today. Here we go. This is where we get into the really juicy part. In 1910, John D. Rockefeller was a billionaire and the richest man in the world. He created his wealth by becoming a magnate of oil production and eventually owned 90% of the oil wells and pipelines in the country. He was the only billionaire in the world, I think, at that point. The research and development for uses of petroleum byproducts and petrochemicals had given us plastics by 1907, and it was called Bakelite. It could be mass produced and was used to insulate wires for the blossoming need of household electric. So good stuff came out of it. Obviously, Rockefeller was a savvy businessman. Insulating wires was just the beginning. Medications, they realized, could now be formulated from petroleum byproducts into a pill and then standardized, meaning every pill was the same. Previously, drugs were compounded by individual pharmacists and medical doctors. Like they would have the mortar and pestle, and they'd be grinding up things into a powder, getting a powder out of a big white apothecary jar on a shelf, putting that powder into an envelope. All right, now consumers could now, oh wait, hold on, I skipped something. Previously, drugs were compounded by individual pharmacists. Aspirin, formerly sold as a powder distributed only by medical doctors, became a pill in 1915, and consumers could buy it over the counter in a convenient form. Prior to 1910, there were 155 medical schools in the United States teaching all facets of healing arts, and there was no standard. So 155, and I have to look up how many states there were at that time. But that was a lot of medical schools. Each school was different from the other because there was no standardization, no standard of education. And depending on which school you attended, the students could learn everything from naturopathy to homeopathy, which is completely different, to medical practice as it was taught in the European medical schools. Some students were taught the use of the newly discovered drugs, which included cocaine and opiates. In 1910, a man by the name of Robert Flexner was enlisted by John D. Rockefeller, and he published the Flexner Report in 1910. I'm fairly certain his name was Robert. We might come across it in the next page. So the Flexner Report, published in 1910, was subsidized by John D. Rockefeller's billions and was an exhaustive study of the existing medical schools, the 155 medical schools at that time. In John D. Rockefeller's thinking, there was too many. Now he's a businessman, so he's thinking, how do I get more medical doctors dispensing my stuff? So those and the healing arts that use the plant-based medicine, which is naturopathy and homeopathy, were undesirable in Rockefeller's plans. He wanted to optimize his use of petroleum byproducts. And because naturopathy and homeopathy use plants found in nature and not laboratory created drugs that could be patented, they were unfavorable arts. Rockefeller had no use for those healing arts in his vision of what modern medicine would become. Encouraging the use of petrochemicals in an organized, standardized medical system was at the core of the medical school restructure. The Flexner Report found in its study that there were vast differences between medical schools. Some adhered to the code newly created from standards of teaching commonly found in Europe, but most did not. So, with John D. Rockefeller's influence, the number of medical schools in the United States was reduced from 155 to 31. Anything related to homeopathy, naturopathy, botany, acupuncture, or chiropractic was deemed substandard and given the label quackery. First, John D. Rockefeller found a way to create income from his pharmaceutical byproducts. Then he created the consumer pipeline he needed to sell these pharmaceuticals via the medical professional. Brilliant, right? Brilliant. Just think about who he was. He was great at making money, and he wanted to use every blasted piece um, of the um, of the oil production that he could. So he created a product, and then he created the profession around the product to dispense the product. This is what we have today. Let that sink in for a minute. Modern conventional medicine was not born from its fantastic results and its contribution to humanity. It was born because of a money pipeline to make a billionaire richer. Now, I am all about capitalism. I love small business. I love innovation. But don't put the facade on the conventional medical model that it was started because it was saving lives and reversing disease states, because it does not. Do not pull that wool over our eyes any longer. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. I go on. So he created the consumer pipeline he needed to sell the pharmaceuticals by creating the medical doctor. He was able to successfully shun the remainder of safe and effective and cheaper healing arts by first not recognizing them to be doctors and then to label them as quackery, and that still holds today. Crazy, right? This has been kind of a shorter episode for us, but I really want you to let that settle in. In spite of the results, in spite of the fact that chiropractic has been around for 125 years and under persecution 90% of the time, it still exists and continues to flourish. Why? It flourishes because of the results. Because people get well and they tell their neighbor and they tell their sister and they tell their friend. The conventional medical model was created because it was a pipeline to use petrochemical byproducts, not because of its fantastic results. And sure, like we talked about, medications work. Medications work, but they do not solve the problem and they do not heal the person. So, as always, I am hoping that with each passing episode, you get closer to being your own best expert. Bye for now.